All right, let's go, because you know what I came here to do.
I don't get paid for overtime. I'm here to fight.
Like I said, Nathan Gorman, Lucas Brown, good fight. Fabio Wardley, Lucas Brown, good fight. Dempsey McKean, Lucas Brown, good fight. Jared Anderson, Lucas Brown, good fight. Joe Joyce, Lucas Brown. Joseph Parker, Lucas Brown. Joe Joyce versus Joseph Parker, good fight. Joe Joyce versus Joseph Parker was practically made. Joseph Parker agreed terms. Frank Warren announced the fight. The BT subscribers were really looking forward to that fight. I was looking forward to that fight. Joseph Parker doesn't phone Frank Warren back. Frank Warren sends him a message. What's happened? How come you haven't got back to us about the Joe Joyce fight? Oh, sorry, Frank. I've signed a deal with Sky. And now he's fighting Lucas Brown. Joe tried to clean up the situation on TalkSport. And let's remember that the fight would have probably been this month if he didn't pull out originally, because Andy Lee's wife was pregnant, so he couldn't train Joe. So the fight would have been on BT. And now Joe today is saying, well, I still want the fight. Why can't we have the fight on Sky? You can send Joe over to Sky. Let's not make out the fight can't happen. Well, in Frank Warren's defense, there's no way Frank's going to sign over the fight to Sky. Why would he do that? When, before the feeble Andy Lee excuse, it was assumed that the fight was going to be on BT. Joe didn't have a promoter. And it seemed almost instantaneous. As soon as he signed with Sky, we're hearing about Joe Parker versus Lucas Brown. Basically, Warren had no choice but look for other options for Joe Joyce, and they came up with... What do we think about Hammer? What did you think they were going to do when you signed with Sky? What, is Sky going to let you go over there? No, because we know how the politics are. If he was going to take on somebody as good as Joyce on Sky or better, then we wouldn't be having this discussion, but he's not. When Frank gave Joseph Parker the money in case he was to be brought in to replace Dillian to face Tyson Fury, that is a gesture of good faith to say, okay, me and Joe is cool. Me and Joe is cool right now. He hasn't got a promoter, right? So I can give him this, and before he makes any other decisions what he's going to do, he's probably going to run it by me and see if we can work something out. Example, the Joe Joyce fight, right? But Joe did him dirty. He did do him dirty. Forget Frank. Frank hasn't always had the cleanest pair of hands in how he deals with fighters, right? And Joe did what he had to do. Boxing's a short career, blah, 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 blah. Fair enough. But what about the fans? What about the fans? The Sky Sports fans, are you really happy with Joe Parker versus Lucas Brown? It's not a good matchup. At least not on paper. In the ring, it might be a different thing, but that's not a good matchup for a former world champion who isn't an old heavyweight or anything like that. 2 defeats on his record, should be facing way better opposition. Simple. As for the Andy Lee couldn't train him because Andy's wife was pregnant, we know that's bullshit now, and we know why they brought up that lame excuse. They were trying to buy time to see what their options were, to either sign with Sky or take Frank up on his offer to fight Joyce. And they played Frank. Frank got played. The fans got played, more importantly. Now, I'm old school, you know. I'm old school geezer, right? And in Frank Warren's world, Bob Arum's world, in Barry Hearn's world, and in Don King's world, I know some of you are going to say Don is immoral and this and that, but a handshake means a lot. Now, I know a lot of you younger dudes, there's no loyalty, no this, there's none of this. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I get where you're coming from. But when you're dealing with old money and old morals, it can always come back to haunt you. That handshake meant a lot to Frank Warren.
All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one.
Do you know what? I never said this publicly before, and I think between me and him, he knows, that I really like Tyson. He's a good character in the game. He's a very intelligent man. But the Tyson I boxed at that time, he was a cheating basically. Yeah, and he's I call him a for that time. But the Tyson now, he's a cool guy. I like him. Or maybe it's because he's a millionaire now. The old broke Tyson is he's a cheating But that's between me and him anyway. He knows what he did, and I don't like it.
Derek says Tyson knows what he did, and that's between him and Tyson. It's a secret. Well, Don Charles and Derek believe that Tyson thumbed Derek in the eye deliberately, which led to the stoppage in a rematch they had in 2014. Tyson Fury, he'll obviously deny this and he'll say Derek quit. But like Derek says, that's between them two and only they know the truth. Now, the thumb in the eye story I got on good authority. And when Derek said he was cheating, I mean, let's keep it real. The second Chisora fight is only 3 months before Tyson Fury fought Christian Hammer. And we know what happened with his post-fight test, don't we? With Christian Hammer. Is there something more Derek knows about Tyson Fury's PED past that he's not telling us? So Derek, he didn't want to divulge too much, but it's still playing on his mind. Now, a lot of Tyson Fury fans are not going to want to hear what I've got to say. But Tyson Fury has a lot of enemies in the United Kingdom. It's part of the reason he doesn't want to fight over here. Lots of the media have been suppressed. A lot of boxing people have been suppressed in their ability to talk about Tyson Fury, his UCAD case, and other indiscretions. And one day, it's all going to come out. And bam! One day. Josh Taylor today disassociated himself from Daniel Kinahan. And if Tyson Fury loses the protection from certain people, this shit's coming out. I still don't like the whole stay out of the ring inactivity since December, you know, and even the fight that they had in December when a couple of rounds and Anthony Yarde barely broke sweat. I still don't like him not taking a couple of fights to tune up for Beterbiev in October. I don't like it. But I tell you what, the way that I've seen people write Anthony Yarde off totally, and I give Beterbiev full credit for becoming unified champion, 3 straps, but I think his victory over Joe Smith is being slightly overhyped, and it's understandable. It's perhaps making me think about the fight a little different. Some of you might be thinking Beats doesn't rate Anthony Yarde. Now, you're hearing selectively, if that's what you're thinking. My criticism is just the inactivity and the opposition. I think Yarde is a tremendous talent, potential world beater. Looking at Joe Smith's performance on Saturday, I think Yarde could have got him out of there as well. Maybe not with the air of destruction that Beterbiev did, because Beterbiev is the better fighter. He's beat the better opposition. So there's no way I can say Yarde is better than Beterbiev. I can't. I think there's a few people who probably haven't seen Anthony Yarde box more than a couple of times who are underestimating how good he potentially could be. Could be the most dangerous opponent that Beterbiev has faced. Not necessarily saying best, but could be the most dangerous. Callum Johnson caught Beterbiev with counter punches, and I'm not sure how effective Beterbiev is against good counter punches. Yarde can counter punch pretty well, and when he wants, he can fight on the front foot pretty well as well. In all truth, Joe Smith shouldn't have even been in the ring. Like, he didn't beat Vlasov. From what I saw, he didn't beat Vlasov. Good fighter. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter all of a sudden in hindsight. In fact, Smith would be a good fight for the likes of Yarde before he stepped up and took on the likes of Beterbiev. But how much time do I say that now? Smith admitted that he got tagged early with that overhand right, and it threw his equilibrium out, and he was unable to recover. And the jab was a bit of a broken record in there, wasn't it? And we know why now. All he could do was just keep throwing it, and Beterbiev just kept coming over the top of it, But he couldn't get his brain to adjust to what was happening. It was scrambled, the equilibrium went. Like when Callum Smith hit Lenin Castillo with that right hand. You saw how the leg went into spasm. That's the brain trying to send a message to the body part to regulate itself, but it can't. It's scrambled. And although Joe Smith didn't have his legs going to spasm and it wasn't as dramatic as that, the loss of equilibrium, or whatever was going on, all the brain could do was tell him jab, keep jabbing, keep jabbing, keep jabbing, even though that was the incorrect thing to do at that time. His brain wasn't sending him any other functions like move, circle away from the right hand. It wasn't sending him anything like that. Any plan B or C that he and his trainers brought into the ring, the brain wasn't processing. That's the complexity of being a human. This can be from either a brain injury, equilibrium thrown off, or if you're just under a stressful situation, the brain will resort to very rudimentary function just to try and get you through. You know, like sometimes you're watching a fight and you're thinking, Why don't you just throw punches? Throw some more punches. And the fighter that you're screaming at the ring or screaming at the TV screen to throw more punches just can't respond. His trainers are barking at him and he can't respond. It could be either stress or brain injury. Doesn't have to be a major brain injury, but just, buzzed, scrambled, equilibrium, just not reacting. And Smith looked like a stressed fighter in there on Saturday. He regretted that he couldn't take the belts back home, and he's going to take some time out and stay in shape. He'll be back. Anthony Yarde is a good wild card. It's definitely a good wild card, and I ain't writing him off. I just wish he was more active. But how many times have I said that now? I'll be honest with you, Frank Warren is in danger of really humiliating himself. Like, all roads lead to Anthony Yarde getting beaten up in there. He's inactive against an accomplished fighter, one of the hardest hitters in the game. He hasn't really been fighting the type of opponents that can ready himself for a challenge like this. The likely outcome is Yarde gets beaten up. We can just hope he can make it competitive. That's all we can hope. And Frank Warren and Bob, DAZN, Dead Zone, Dark Zone, making jokes, grandpa bullshit. You're going to have to explain why you put an inadequate challenger in London where Beterbiev is not a name, and Anthony Yarde is not a name. He's never done pay-per-view over here. He's not a name. He's not a big name. That's no shade. When has he headlined the O2 and filled it out or anything like that? He's never did that, right? If Yarde don't show up and make it competitive in October, Warren and ARUM are going to have to answer why he was so inactive and why the opposition has been so weak, and why did you put this fight on when there's an undisputed fight to be had out there? Why did you do that? Why are you wasting our time? So reputations are on the line. They're on the line here, and I hope people are aware of that. Tunde as well. Name calling. What did Bob say about the UFC? Did he say it was a bunch of racist skinhead homos rolling about on the floor? But in 2022, according to reports, I don't follow the UFC myself, it seems to be a very well-run organization and financially viable, sustainable, by all accounts. The punters seem to like it. They get all the fights they want to see. Bob seems to know everything about the American market and about his fighters. But we can pick two off the bat. Stevenson recently said he wanted to become undisputed at 130. Bob said he wants to get him into fights with Tank, although the logic there seems very flawed, because since that lawsuit that he took out on the PBC, he hasn't done much business with them, has he? He wasn't able to secure Terence Crawford, the Errol Spence fight, was he? No, he wasn't. Shakur said he wants to be undisputed. Bob Arum said he's got no interest in that. Ask most of the fans what they would prefer. Would they prefer Stevenson to wait around chasing a Tank Davis fight with all the politics and in-house fight ideology between both networks and promotional outfits? Would they prefer that, or to see Shakur go for undisputed? They want to see Shakur go for undisputed. Now, I already heard Joe DeGardia, who works with Joe Smith, saying, look, we want to fight Bivol. We want to avenge the Bivol loss, and we want to become undisputed champion. That's why Bob said if Beterbiev wins, he'll fly over to London and fight Yarde. He didn't say that for Joe Smith, because they had no intention of taking that fight. But the way it was put out in the press, it seemed like Bob and Beterbiev was on the same page. Yeah, we'll fly over to London. But post-fight, after destroying Smith, they asked Beterbiev what he wants to do, and he said he wants Bivol. He wants to fight for undisputed. Bob is out of touch with what the fans want and what his fighters want to do. He's a liability. There's too much people out there who give Bob way too much respect. Way too much. Calling DAZN the Dark Zone or the Dead Zone, it's in line with what he had to say about the UFC. When he's feeling the pressure from the competition, we know what Bob will do. He's attacked the PBC, took them to court, accused them of not wanting to mess with the white guy. You can't trust the white guy. And people are wondering why he's got a potential lawsuit for racism against him. Serves him right. You got a big mouth. Deserve everything he gets. And now he's starting on DAZN because he's under pressure. He can't produce a fight like Triple G and Canelo. He can't produce a fight like that. Nobody watches the Dead Zone. Nobody watches the Dark Zone. Nobody knows Bivol. Beterbiev knew Bivol. He didn't say anything about no Anthony Yarde. He knew who Bivol was, though, and he knew who he wanted to fight. UMAR IFL brought up Joshua leaving Sky to go over to DAZN. So Frank Warren said, well, DAZN must have a lot of faith that Joshua can beat USYK in the rematch. UMAR says, do you think that's why Sky didn't put up the money to keep AJ there? Because they didn't think he could beat USYK. Is this guy serious? These guys are not journalists. You see him and DAZN or whatever his name is. You're not no journalist. You are a mouthpiece for Frank Warren and whoever else pays you off. Because he's trying to insinuate that Sky were not desperate to keep hold of Joshua. Like we didn't see Adam Smith ubiquitously popping up telling us, I think AJ's going to stay. He's going to stay. Johnny Nelson said it was a loss. Is this guy joking? Is this guy pretending that AJ hasn't been the biggest draw in this country for how long? It's a joke. These guys, Rick Glazer, DAZN, IFL UMAR.
Playing yourself, y'all. Playing yourself.
Pressure is getting to Josh Taylor. Now he's been stripped of his WBA title for not fulfilling his mandatory obligations. And we was all thinking he was going to move up to 147, but this could be good news for Jack Catterall because the pressure is getting to Josh Taylor. He says the only reason he's staying at junior welter is he wants to fight Jack Catterall again. I don't think it was the wrong decision in February, but he wants to shut everybody up. He wants to prove that was an off night and that he's one of the best fighters on the planet because of all the stick and abuse he's been getting and the way Jack has been mouthing off and moaning. Josh Taylor said he wants to shut his mouth. Josh is asking here on BBC, where was all this attention when he became a history maker? The first person from the UK to become an undisputed champ in the 4-belt era. Where was all this attention then? So he feels very aggrieved with his career right now. Going by my experience of the events, most people online thought Josh Taylor lost. He was flawed, he was outboxed, he came back in the late rounds, but he wasn't clearly winning them late rounds. Looked like Catterall won. You know, it was so much a debated event. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, even wrote to the police questioning the judge's decision. Although, you know, Hoyle is an MP for Chorley, Catterall's hometown. Now, before a rematch can be entertained, the WBC have ordered that Taylor has to make a mandatory defense against Jose Sabeda. I mean, he's already been stripped of one belt. I think he should let them take the WBC strap and just fight Catterall for the 2 straps. I don't think he should stay at 140 too long. He should put all his effort into making weight as healthily as possible to try and get his stripes back from Catterall. Not straps, stripes. There was one picture of Taylor before he made weight against Catterall and he looked horrible. Didn't like the look of it. He looked like a ghost. Skinny, gaunt, pale. I don't think he should fight Zabeda. He should try to avenge the Catterall loss, and if he is able to pull it off, jump up to 147. But 2 fights at 140, I think he's pushing it. I would also entertain the theory that his confidence is a little shook after the Catterall performance, and he doesn't fancy taking on Crawford or Spence at 147. Stay at 140. Try and get his swag back. But he expects his fight with Zabeda to take place in September or October, and after that he will go after Catterall. Now, Catterall himself, for anyone who thinks, you're just picking on Anthony Yarde, he needs to get himself a fight. He needs to get himself a fight. Could actually do with a couple of fights. Yeah? Since 2019, he had a routine points victory over someone who was 14-2 and a Josh Taylor fight. He needs to get active as well. Way too inactive. Better go talk to his man Frank. You know, Frank doesn't mind leaving him on the sidelines. Frank probably perked up when he heard that Josh Taylor will give him a rematch, and Frank would probably let him wait it out, sit on the sidelines, let Josh Taylor fight Zabeda, and have Jack Catterall wrapped up in a protective bubble until 2023 to get his fight against Josh Taylor. That's not productive in any way to get the best out of your fighter. USYK, he said the objective is to outwork Joshua, not knock him out. If the knockout comes, it comes. Now he's telling lies. He believes he beat AJ, he'll beat him again, and this time he'll beat him easier. The first fight went the distance. I don't think this one goes the distance. No way. USYK wasn't going to be psyched out in a stare-off. That didn't look like the face of someone who's going to casually just let the fight go the distance. Not if he can help it, he's not. There's a lot at stake for USYK, and he was perhaps more aggressive than what we've seen. You know, he's being used as a tool. He's a willing participant to highlight what's going on in this country, and the Ukrainians will be looking for nothing less than a win. AJ, on a couple of times, he referred to the loss as a blip on the road to greatness, as a blip. Is he overconfident? And is that better than him being this nervous wreck that a lot of people suggest he is? I was watching Ade, and he said AJ looked relaxed, and he did look relaxed. AJ looked relaxed. Like, USYK is a crazy man, and we don't know how good he really is at the weight class, and this fight will go a long way to explaining more. I underestimated him first time around. I thought Joshua would win comfortably, and he didn't. He didn't. So he's a bit of a crazy guy, but this is going to be a tougher fight for him. But this isn't the time for the breakdown. It's going to be a way tougher fight for him. And if it's not, Joshua needs to retire. I will break my rule. The rule being it's not up to me to tell fighters when to retire, but I'll take an exception there. If Joshua doesn't put him under extreme pressure, it's time to go. It's time to stop. You got Robert Garcia in there. New team. Got rid of Robert McCracken. One Rob goes for another Rob. Hey, 80 million site fee from the Saudis. They like Joshua. They like Anthony Joshua. Was that £65 million? 50-50 split between him and USYK. As for who's going to broadcast the event, Gareth A. Davis was trying to say that's up in the air. Well, it was DAZN's name on the press conference today, and I don't think no one else aired it. It was DAZN's name. All signs lead to DAZN. Leonard Ellerbe talking about Eddie Hearn messed up Joshua's career. Did you hear how much the site fee was, Leonard? $65 million. Messed up his career. I tell you what, Eddie Hearn needs to mess up a few more fighters' careers by the sound of it. Maybe he should be messing up Tank's career. And like, Leonard has got a whole load of lames who try and back up his so-called war with Eddie Hearn. Like, one of them was saying to try and downplay Canelo and Triple G3. Crawford and Spence will outperform this dated fight. Time for the PBC to step up and give the fans what they want. Here Leonard supporting the comment. Anybody with common sense knows the real. Well, your boss, Floyd, said they ain't making no Crawford versus Spence fight. That fight ain't being made anytime soon. Why is Leonard backing the comment up? Like this is a reality. Crawford, his sister is online going against all the people still throwing shots at her brother from the PBC side. Crawford ain't got no contract as far as I remember. He didn't get no contract. I mean, your minion who tried to back up your argument used the fight that you're not putting on. Eddie's actually putting on Triple G and Canelo. It could be as outdated as you want. And it wasn't a fight I really wanted, to be honest. Everyone knows that. But at the same time, the PBC ain't got no bigger fight than that. Who they got for Spence now? Now you've knocked off UGAS. What fights? I mean, the pay-per-view on that flopped, didn't it? What fights you got for Spence? They have no big fights. They have no big fights. It's weird how Leonard and Bob have gone into this double act like they're going to go on Broadway dissing Eddie Hearn. But I don't see the Saudis offering these site fees to any Bob Arum fighters. Tyson Fury, nope. Inoue, nope. Josh Taylor, nope. Shakur, nope. None of them. Errol Spence, nope. Wilder, nope. Charlo, nope. None of them. None of them. I'm going to boldly predict that the arrogance from across the pond and the emerging international markets are going to crush their industries. Not the boxers, they're still going to turn out talented boxers. But the industries are going to be crushed by the emerging international markets while they stick their head in the sand thinking, we're still the best. Wow, I tell you what, Brian, this is pretty scathing. Not from Wilder. You know, Wilder believes USYK will win, and that's fair enough. USYK won the first fight. If that's the way he's picking, that's the way he's picking. But Boxing 24 are saying you can't blame Deontay for going with the safe pick and selecting USYK to win. Joshua seems too fragile mentally to win the rematch. It doesn't matter that Joshua has a new coach in Robert Garcia. He's still the same person that lost the first encounter with USYK and was destroyed by Andy Ruiz in their first fight. Wow, so they're basically talking like losing on points to USYK makes you the worst fighter ever. That's scathing. That's pretty scathing. Well, if you're not going to give someone credit for avenging a loss, he avenged the Andy Ruiz loss. But they're not saying he showed character to come back. Like, after someone's knocked you out, it takes character to come back and avenge the loss. I know he didn't knock Ruiz out, but he got his belts back. So he can't be that much of a mentally fragile person if he can avenge a loss, if he can accept he got it wrong, go through the training camp, the adjustments, and then get it right. How mentally fragile can he be? News in brief, Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz might be a bit past its sell by now, you know. Rather than making Ortiz versus Martin and Ruiz versus Areola, they should have just made that fight then. But the PBC are very slow to react to what the public demands are, and that's just the absolute truth. And they're making it a pay-per-view as well. Yeah, make it a pay-per-view after you make Areola Ruiz a pay-per-view and Ortiz versus Martin a pay-per-view. Make it a pay-per-view after both of them fights flop, and then make it. Come on, man. They got Isaac Cruz, and I didn't think he was fighting anymore. Abdomara's on the undercard. Adrian Broner asking Mayweather for help with boxing return. I need you most right now. I mean, what more can you say? Just pathetic.